In today's video, I'm going to be sharing what I learned drafting Marvel Super Heroes 7 times in the early access event. Thanks to Wizards for that free preview access so I could get that experience and have that knowledge to share with you. So in this video, I'm going to be covering some key takeaways from that early experience. And while it's not enough draft to really have a huge sense of the meta, because I didn't even get to play every single deck, I do think that you can get some knowledge, glean some things, and I wanted to share those early impressions because I thought they would be helpful. So the first thing that I want to talk about is there are a lot of really strong rares in this set. They kind of supercharged a lot of the high rarity cards, and I think that that can change the way that you draft the format. For starters, I think that it felt like in many cases the kind of lower powered cards were able to tangle with each other, and then one player would play a really strong card. And the way I like to adjust my drafting style in these sorts of formats where it feels like some of the really strong cards are kind of taking over games is that you value flexibility in the drafting portion very highly so that you can maximize your odds of opening something in pack 2. So if you open a pack 1 that doesn't have anything crazy in it and you just manage to get deep into one color, like let's say that you make some sacrifices in the draft so that instead of being like a blue-red deck after pack 1, you're like mostly blue with a few red cards, that leaves you flexible in pack 2 to open a Mega Bomb in white or get past pick 2 a Mega Bomb in white and then get that power level through flexibility. Another way that you can get like some manufactured power level is through build around cards. So for example, if I get the card Avengers Assemble, that can be a way to get some extra power level into my deck by building around a really strong card, because I'm not going to take too much of a hit in power level from the build around aspect of it. It didn't feel like there were like certain lanes that were really, really weak, at least at the early stages. It felt like there was like kind of reasonable support for most things you wanted to do. And so by building around a card like Avengers Assemble, or by getting a card like Super Scroll and going super deep into black and being a heavy black deck, that sort of thing, it felt like that was very doable, and it would really enhance my deck by having access to these really powerful cards. And so that was something that I thought was pretty valuable, is the idea that I can manufacture some power level by willing to build around cards as well. Another thing is that if you prioritize mana fixing, then you can also kind of get the benefits of that. For example, if I'm playing like a red-green deck, but I take some mana fixing in packs that don't have anything crazy for me, maybe an okay playable, but nothing crazy. If I get some fixing for white or blue, maybe I'll end up opening a card that's really strong or getting past a card that's really strong in another color. And then because I've prioritized fixing, I can juice up my deck a little bit, add those extra cards to my deck, and get some extra wins from those rares. And so I think that it's easy to think, oh, there's really strong rares. That makes things, it makes the games like less interesting or less enjoyable. But there are ways that you can use this to your advantage so that you can end up with more of those cards than your opponent. Because ultimately, if you can play it better, you can end up with good cards like that. Another thing that I wanted to say is that there are lots of must-kill threats in this format. I've already talked about rares. Obviously, you want to kill rares if they're going to take over the game. But there are also a lot of uncommons that demand answers. So, for example, Jessica Jones can just get so much card advantage over time if you don't have an answer for it. A card like Agent 13, Sharon Carter, doesn't really need to tangle in combat. It can just sit there, and then if your opponent has like a flyer or really any way to make a profitable attack, it just gets you like clues. Or a card like Madam Hydra, it's not going to be tangling in combat very much. It's a 2/3, but if it stays in play, your opponent's going to get an army pretty quickly. And so these sorts of cards, even regardless of high rarity, these are uncommons that just kind of demand answers. There's also the power-up mechanic, which is these creatures that a lot of the time will get played early and then have an activated ability late, or if they get played late, they can kind of use the activated ability right away. But there's a lot of cards that you just want to be able to kill because your opponent's going to get some value from them if they stick around. And so even though there is plenty of good removal in this set, when you just look at the like macro things, like, okay, black has a few removal spells, red has a couple removal spells, green has some really good removal spells, that sort of, green has like a really good one at common, one good uncommon, that sort of thing. When you look at that, you're like, oh, there's plenty of removal going around, but then you don't really think about, oh my gosh, my opponent is constantly playing cards that I have to kill or they're just going to snowball the game. And there's like a normal amount of removal versus like lots of cards that have to be killed, lots of extra removal. It's more like normal amount of removal, lots of cards that feel like they need to like die right away. And so it feels like removal is at a priority. And removal is always premium, but this feels like that sort of thing where it's like, okay, there's extra emphasis even compared to where it normally would be. And also the idea of like saving removal spells for the cards that have to die also feels pretty important to me. And so that's something that I was getting that experience during the early access event of oh my gosh, these cards just have to die instantly, and my removal felt very taxed very quickly. So fitting extra removal spells in, that can also sometimes be a candidate for splashing if you do prioritize that mana fixing that we already talked about. Getting that extra removal can definitely be a reason to splash it, like black or something like that, if you're playing like a red-green deck that needs some extra interaction. Another thing that I wanted to say is that card advantage is everywhere. There are so many cards. Like, there were games I played where like both players were playing like 4 or 5 2-for-1 creatures or things like that. So as some examples, at uncommon, there's like Red Guardian Super Soldier, which is just like a super messed up card. There's also like Claw Sonic Subjugator, which is just an easy 2-for-1. Even at lower rarities, like this isn't even an extensive list, but a card like Crimson Operative getting a 2-for-1, or Hero in Training, really nice as a 2-for-1 that draws you a card. These sorts of cards are getting a lot of card advantage. There's even some card draw spells that are fine, but generally speaking, because there's these creatures that affect the board that also get card advantage, also the power-up creatures fall into this camp where they have this activated ability that will oftentimes generate value in some way, which counts as like card advantage. They'll get a token out of the deal, or they'll like do whatever minor effect. These sorts of cards that are getting value means that value is not really the choke point. It feels like a lot of the time there's a lot of stuff to do. The choke point felt like it was in the efficiency camp. And so if you're thinking about, okay, what do I want to prioritize in the draft? If there's access to free bountiful card advantage, the choke point then becomes, what can I do to interact early so that I can then take over the game and like get a board state advantage, because I'm going to have access to more cards than I might normally have because of all of these value creatures. So for example, a premium removal spell in this format is something like Go Nuts, which is just single mana and can do really big things and have like a big effect on the game, where you play your 4-drop and then the next turn you go like Go Nuts, play another 4-drop, like kill one of their 4-drops. It just can be like a really big swing because you have this really efficient card. Or a card like Lightning Strike, which I really didn't see lightning strikes going around the table because players were taking them very highly, because even though there are these value cards, having these efficient removal spells is really, really important, and just efficient cards in general to be able to like leverage the fact that you're going to have extra cards. The choke point then becomes, okay, how can I use my like how can I develop my game plan early so that when I get to the mid game I'm like ahead on board and I can really like take advantage of that and use my cards and card advantage then, because you want to be like kind of ahead when you're using your card advantage, so your opponent's under pressure and they can't really leverage their card advantage as effectively. And so that's something that I also wanted to mention. There is also like some clunky card draw spells in the set, and I just don't really think they're that necessary, because there's so much like efficient card advantage where you just play a power-up creature, activate its ability, get some value that way, and you don't need to be investing in like a pure card draw spell really as much. And so that was kind of the way that the format felt like it played out. From that perspective. The final thing that I wanted to mention is 2 specific cards that felt absolutely unreal. The first is Photon Blast Barrage. This card just absolutely dominated so many games. It was like this card would just like one side wipe the opponent's board, kill like 3 of their creatures or something, because you would get to like 6 or 7 mana. Players would have traded off resources and you'd just be like, wow, that card just like absolutely savaged me. There are some like, because there's some of these like value creatures that are getting played relatively frequently, they don't have like the biggest stats because they come with some value associated or something of that nature. And so while there are some bigger creatures, especially the power-up creatures can get pretty big, a lot of the other creatures are kind of smallish, and so you're just like zap 3 of your creatures with Photon Blast Barrage, and it's just absolutely devastating. So I put a high priority on that card. And then the other card I wanted to talk about specifically was Khazar of the Savage Land, because it feels like both have like it's like a 3/2 that makes the token, and then both kind of have to be answered, because the token is going to grow in with the landfall, but Khazar is just going to get you extra card advantage with the lands he plays off the top of your deck. And if you can't kill either of them, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's like I have to kill both of these cards, and neither of them really tangling in combat that much until the token's big enough to kind of just dominate things. It just felt like an absolutely like really messed up card. So those 2 uncommons I did want to highlight, but that was just some early takeaways from drafting the format. Just recapping, there's lots of strong rares. Try to figure out a way to fit them into your deck, even if it means like building around cards or taking mana fixing so that you can splash them. Another thing is that removal is at a premium. There's lots of cards that just have to die, and removal is at a normal level. It feels like the cards that have to die is at a higher level than that. So even if it's like, okay, I have a few removal spells, it's like, okay, still put some priority on those removal spells. Card advantage is everywhere, so you don't need to prioritize like pure card draw as much. Just focus on like those cards that generate value while affecting the board. Those are at an absolute premium. Those are really good, but the choke point really is the efficient cards on the other end of the spectrum, where it's like, okay, I really want to make sure I have some cheap interaction spells, some cheap plays that I can make that are going to affect the game in a positive way, get me ahead so that then when I am getting this card advantage, I'm on the front foot while using this card advantage. And then, of course, that final note about Photon Blast Barrage and Khazar of the Savage Land. That's going to do it for this video, though. If you made it to the end of the video, leave hashtag early wins, because hopefully these early impressions will help you get some early wins in the format. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you next time.